Hey everybody, welcome back to the Help Me Parent podcast. We have an important episode today. I'm calling it the Dadsode. We have, as always with us, Dr. Ellen Moore, but we also have some dads with us today. So let's start with some introductions.
Phillip Moore, executive pastor here at the Ark, married for 34 years.
Is that right?
That's right.
It is right. Almost. It'll be 35 this year.
Yeah. And we have two children, grown children, 29-year-old son, Josh, and should we say her age?
Yeah.
27-year-old daughter, Megan.
She's about to be a few days.
About to be. All righty, who do we have over here?
Nate Boyd. I'm the junior high pastor here. I've been married 36 years, actually. Been married 10 years in like a week. So we have 4 daughters from the ages of about to be 9 and about to be 4. And then whatever numbers in between, because I always lose track.
Yeah, you always lose track. I don't know what you are.
Yeah, I'm Matt Nespry. I'm the elementary pastor here at the Ark, and I have one little girl. She's 4, so just started school today. So
Yeah.
Started today.
big day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And your girl started today too?
Yep. The 3 older ones did, yeah.
The older ones. Wow. Okay, well, I have the most important question we're going to get to first today. Did anybody bring dad jokes?
Oh, dear.
I don't think those were allowed, were they?
Yeah.
I brought some dad jokes.
Oh
my
and
gosh.
everybody loves my dad jokes.
All right.
I just had to.
You can do one.
I will do one. I had like 3. I will do one. So this guy was saying he told his wife that she should embrace her mistakes because she kept on making them. So she gave him a hug.
Oh,
Oh,
You
yeah.
ever
Nice.
felt like that?
When do we
Wow.
get
No.
to the good part?
I just wanted to start with that. It was very fitting for the Dadsode. But since we have you here, Dr. Ellen, too, I kind of wanted to start with parenting roles. What is a mom's role? What is a dad's role? How do y'all see that in y'all's relationship? And then how does that work in y'all's family as well?
I think that's a great question. I also think it's one that doesn't have just one answer because I think every family is unique. Every relationship is unique. Everyone's strengths and weaknesses are unique. So you kind of have to find what each other's strengths are as mom and dad and play to those. Having said that, I do think it's a great thing to talk about, who's going to be responsible for different things. So we did that early on. You want to speak to that?
I think there's some things with roles that kind of come naturally that you grow up seeing. Their dad's supposed to be the provider, disciplinarian. There's certain chores around the house, that kind of thing. But I think one of the things that I had an aha moment early on is I saw that one of my roles is to be, lack of a better word, the cheerleader, champion of the family. And I was challenged on that to voice my excitement about being a Moore. I love the Moores. We're the Moores. I mean, and letting my kids see that from me. And we took it as far as we developed a little secret hand sign, that the kids would be up doing their recitals and stuff. And we had a little hand signature that, we would throw incognito and stuff. But I found that was it was important for the kids to hear that I'm excited and I love our family. Yeah. And that was important for me as a dad to do. So.
Yeah, that's really great. What about y'all?
Yeah, I think whenever you talk about roles and stuff like that, it's easy to get into the, very nitty gritty of, well, I wake up at this time, or I do this for this kid, or I do this. But I think you're right on. It's important to get down to really just the foundation, and all that other stuff will change over time as jobs change and careers change and kids get older. But as long as that foundation of who you are as a parent is solidified, that's the important part, is making sure that, hey, I love my family, I'm here for them, and then that other stuff kind of fits into place.
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, I agree. I think I loved what Ellen said. You really play to your strengths as a parent, not really getting so caught up on, I'm the dad, I have to do this, or you're the mom, you have to do that, which is great, not just parenting, but marriage in general, of just really finding out what are you good at and how can you best provide that for your child. And so that's how we've played it out in our family. Of course, being the dad of a little girl, I do get to be the sweet dad. But I love that I don't feel locked into, I have to be the stern, strict all the time, overbearing father that can tend to be projected out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I will, if I can say something else to that. I think, this y'all's generation is a lot better at not just going with stereotypical roles, that mom's always in the kitchen and dad's never in the kitchen, those sorts of things. So I think that's really healthy because some guys are great cooks.
Not me.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
She was quick.
Agreed.
We're getting real honest.
But I think something that is good that we grew up with that has kind of can get lost is kind of what Phillip was saying about dads being the cheerleader, but just the importance of the dad's role in a family, that it's like we can go too far to the other extreme. We don't want, a lot of guys don't want to be this overbearing, authoritative, or dictator type role that we've seen abused, At the same time, there is a place for a dad to be the strength of a family, to provide strength, to provide stability, to provide wisdom. And I hate for a dad's voice to get lost because it's so important. And for dads, to say, well, I don't want to be that, or for moms to say, don't be so hard on them or whatever. I think we have to be careful there. And I may have shared this on another episode, but, there were times that I needed Phillip to say, hey, you're being too soft on the kids, and we need to kind of shore this up. And then I would do the same. I would remind, hey, I think we need to let up a little bit here. And we would have conversations that, we've been giving a lot of no's to our kids. I think we need to look for some opportunities to give some yeses. Yeah. So I think it's good to look at the roles. I also think one of the things that is better in this generation is, dads were the disciplinarian back in the day, and moms were, well, wait till your dad gets home. And I think that's a mistake because we don't want our kids to ever dread daddy coming home. That should be a celebration and, something that we look forward to. And so I think that's a real disservice that moms can do and put on to dads, and dads need to be celebrated and they need to not be afraid to be strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go kind of touch back like what you're talking about and what Matt had mentioned, because first of all, as parents, y'all's first relationship is with God, then it's with each other. So what are your roles as a husband and then as a father? Like, where's the correlation between those two? How do they strengthen one another? And how does that work in y'all's relationship as well?
I would say that Ellen and I found out, and my number one responsibility in being a dad and quote unquote being a successful dad is to be a great husband and to love my wife. And I think that is the best gift that we gave our kids, is that they never questioned, are mommy and daddy okay? Are they going to stay together? Are they, are they fighting? Or they, whatever. I wanted our kids to know that Ellen was number one before them. They didn't take her place, came to it. There was no question who was going to get the nod. Mom was going to get it. And so letting them be assured of our love for each other. To me, you've heard the example before, but it's kind of like we're co-pilots, and we're up front. We're navigating this plane.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the back. Everything else that in our world, all the stuff we have going on, is in the back. But it's our responsibility to co-captain and figure out how to fly this thing.
Mm-hmm.
The kids aren't coming up telling us how to fly or where to go or weighing in on those decisions. Those are between Ellen and I.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was one of the best gifts that I could have given our kids
Mm-hmm.
was that they knew that I loved their mom.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. One of the things that always is kind of in the back of my mind is someday my daughter's going to grow up and marry someone, and I want to give her a good example of who she should marry. And as a dad, that can be such a burden and a mantle, but also a calling to a higher level of, am how I treating my wife right now the same way I would want my daughter's husband to treat her. And setting that example of how I interact with my wife, knowing that kids are always listening. I remember, Ellen, one of the first things I remember you saying is more is caught than taught.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's always amazing how much my daughter just picks up. And so always being aware and cognizant of the fact of how I'm interacting right now with my wife is one day going to influence how my daughter interacts with her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think a lot. I think back to Jesus and what it says. What Paul says that husbands are to love their wives like Christ loved the church. And I think back to that a lot of, okay, how did Jesus show love? Well, he was a servant. Back to what you were saying, he led and put his foot down whenever he had to. He had a good give and take of compassion, but still holding the line of justice and authority. And so finding that balance with your family. And I think the more I love, it's spot on, the more love I have for my wife, I think naturally the more love I'm just going to have for my kids.
Yeah.
It's like working out. Like cardio affects every area of working out. And so if you can like get really good at cardio, that's going to help you in the other areas.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. If your relationship with your spouse is solid and there's love there and there's compassion there and there's mercy there and there's grace there, it's going to spill out into the other areas and make it a little bit easier in some of those.
No, that's great.
Yeah, that provides a lot of stability for kids when they're not having to worry about, are mom and dad okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's not their responsibility, but they feel it when they're not. And it's not that you can't, our kids knew we didn't always agree and would disagree, and they would hear us say we're sorry to each other. That's all healthy. But to be like, oh, is dad going to leave? Is mom going to leave? That creates insecurity, which none of us want for our kids. So making your spouse the priority over the kids really is helping the kids.
One of the things that we learned early on was that we were a family before our kids came along. We were good. We were solid. And you're a welcome addition to this, but you're not the center of our world. You're not now the center of our universe. You don't dictate everything that's going on and how, yes, absolutely. Our life changed. And I'm not saying that we just rocked on as like we did without kids, but we didn't make them the center of the universe. And we established that in them from the beginning, that you're a welcome addition to this family, but you're not the center of everything that we do here. And that's that provided some stability for them, and it helped us to keep this priority all throughout their growing up years.
And I think there's a misconception, and whenever you lead your family like that, oh, well, then my kid's going to be insecure, they won't feel loved, they won't. But it's almost like the opposite happens.
Absolutely.
Whenever not everything is weighing on them and how they're doing, it kind of frees them a little bit. And now it's like, oh, okay, mom and dad love each other. I'm good. I don't have to have that attention all the time.
Right.
That again, stability is the word.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, like Nate, you have 4 girls, Matt, you have a daughter, and y'all have 2 kids. How do you how do you balance that? Like, because y'all have the different life stages as your kids have grown up. How do you balance not making them the center when it can seem that way sometimes? How do you prioritize your marriage?
One thing that comes to mind, especially with a daughter who's 4, is making sure that she knows when she gets an answer from me, she's not going to get a different answer from mom, and vice versa. When mom tells her something, she doesn't get to come to me and get a different answer. It's just a real simple way to say, hey, mom and I are on the same page. And if I think something needs to change, we'll have that conversation behind closed doors. But you can't just come to me and expect me to side with you. I know your mom already told you something different, you know?
That's great.
Yeah, always, husband and wife should always side together. It should never be, you know, dad and kid against mom or mom and kid against mom. It should always be mom and dad together.
Yeah.
We would even go as far as we would just straight up tell them. I would, you know, hey, I love you and I love you, but who do I love the most? And they would go, mommy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Right.
And, you know, and we would instill that in them so that they knew that. And then we would model that when we would make sure we had time for each other and it wasn't our lives being dominated by them and what they needed.
I think it's good too, as a mom. I think a way dads can help. Phillip helped like this early on especially when kids are little and it just takes a lot of time. They're demanding, you know, with the feedings before they can do things for themselves. And so it was easy. I don't want to speak for all moms, so I will say for me, I could get sucked into that and forget that this was the priority, that our marriage was the priority. And so Phillip occasionally saying, hey, I think we need a time out here. Let's get a babysitter. We need a date, or I needed those reminders. And I think that's a good role for the dad to do. And moms, if they're feeling like, hey, I just need to get out of here, to say, hey, can we go on a date? You know, to speak up when we see the other one getting lost in the weeds or just needing a little reminder.
And that wasn't a one-time fix. I mean, we didn't sit down early on and go, hey, all right, let's talk about this and we get it all figured out. What I found was it every season, almost, and when the kids got in school, it was almost every semester, we had to purposefully sit down and go, okay, how are we going to do this together? Otherwise, because we get into the rhythm, or you start assuming, well, hey, what was working then should be working now, and it's not. And I made that mistake. Like, hey, I thought we were good. No, we're not good. We need to figure out how to attack this together and how to manage this together. And so I remember very pointedly, we'd sit down and go, okay, what are the kids' schedules? What's the bus schedule? What do you need? What do I need? And then, you know, part of that is how do we figure into all of that? So being very intentional, and what works in one season doesn't work in the next season. You need to be willing to constantly make those adjustments, is what we found.
One really practical thing we do is the kids' bedtime. It's now it's different for each age because we have, you know, they're getting older, but we're very clear when the bedtime is. And at that time, they are not allowed to come downstairs. And we tell them this is mommy and daddy time. And so we might watch TV, we might cook, we might clean up, we might, clean up together, but we're very clear with them with timing on, okay, this, before then that's us time, right? That's me and kid time. We can, while you're taking a bath, we'll play, whatever. But as soon as this time hits, it's bedtime for you. Now it's me and mom time. And then I think over time that just communicates to them, oh, that's important.
Yeah, because you took the time to spend it with them.
Right.
But you're taking the time when they're not awake to intentionally spend it with one another.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's kind of shift a little bit. What is the biggest struggle you have faced as a dad?
patience.
4 girls, really?
Yeah. Emotions. Managing emotions.
I had to come to grips with just how selfish I am.
Yeah.
And I learned that very early when the kids came. I was like, dang, I'm pretty selfish here, with my time, with Ellen, with different things. And I was just like, I've got to start living for another person here. And then that got multiplied when Megan came along, but just, that's an ugly reality, but I think it shows up when you become a dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny talking about the whole bedtime thing. That's the plus side of it. The negative side that we got into that I found myself a lot is I would rush things with them. Like, okay, let's get this done so that we can get to the next thing. Okay, let's play real quick. Okay, let's do it real quick. And so that's been a big thing for both of us. Erica doesn't struggle with it as much as I do, but having to, no, okay, if we're here, be here, you know, and just enjoy it. And even if it's just for 5 minutes, enjoy it, or if it's for an hour, however long. But yeah, because it's easy to get into, I can start thinking about all the stuff I got to do and I got to get done and I want to do and all the thing, you know, but finding that time to just slow down, and that's been probably the biggest thing that I've been learning.
Yeah.
I'd say kind of similar. Timing is something that you always have to adjust as your kid goes through different seasons. But one of the big revelations was I really do like my time, but my time isn't really my own. Even before I had a kid, it wasn't my own. And so even now with a child, how much more do I need to share time between all my priorities and really prioritizing my time with her when I'm at home, not just letting her, go play in her room or really just giving her some quality one-on-one time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Nate, with having 4 kids, Nate, Matt has 1, we have 2, so you're outnumbered.
Yeah. Yes.
By the way,
In case you didn't know that.
What are some ways that y'all have learned to manage that from a time aspect of making sure they each individually get what they need?
Yeah. I think that's it right there. It's finding, and it's taken, I feel like I'm just, even with our 9-year-old, I'm just starting to understand how she operates. And so learning what each kid needs. Our second oldest, she really just needs like physical time, and I'm not a physical person and Erica's not a physical person. So we both have to remind ourselves, she may just want to just sit and hug for a few minutes, and that's okay. And like, let that be its thing.
Yeah.
Something I actually got from Derek Thompson, a few years ago was, he said he would take his kids on, he called them dates, but it was just go to get ice cream. And so now, I take one girl every Sunday. I take one girl to go get ice cream. And so once a month, they're each getting just an hour and a half with dad. We go get ice cream. We'll go on a walk. And that's probably been the biggest, very practical thing that I've done, that I've seen the most fruit from.
Yeah.
Because they're so different whenever they're individualized, whenever they're on their own, and I just have one of them. I'm a lot of times blown away by, wow, you're a different person whenever it's just you and me than you are whenever the whole family's together. And I think it's important for them to feel like they can be that person around me. And so and it may be that for you, it may not, but that's what I found works for me, is finding that, going to get ice cream, spending just an hour.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So good.
That's great.
Yeah. Kudos to Derek Thompson.
Which is funny. They actually still do that.
Yeah.
They do that still, and all of their kids are in their 20s. So they still go and do that once a month, which is so awesome.
Yeah, which shameless plug.
Shameless
We're going to do
that
an episode with
coming
them for adult
We'll
children.
see if they mention that. And if they mention that, we'll all be like,
I'm gonna
we
ask
already
Eric
know.
if you'll take me to ice cream.
be like, can you squeeze me into your schedule with everything
I'll
else?
put you in every time there's a fifth. Every
Yeah.
fifth Sunday
Yeah,
of the
you
month.
get
Sunday.
You get the
it'll be
fifth
with
Sunday.
Pastor Phillip.
Nate and Phillip Sunday.
I'll block that out.
Date day.
So y'all are all on staff here at a church and you spend time in prayer, you spend time learning the word, how have y'all figured out, or not figured out, how are you learning and applying the Father's love to your parenting styles?
I have to say it comes down to he's both our example and our goal.
Yeah.
And I think it's a constant thing of I'm never going to get there, but I'm always trying to get there, and emulating that kind of love. It's a love I don't naturally have. And so I'm going to have to depend on the Lord to be bigger in me to allow that to come through.
Yeah. That's great.
Have you ever hung out with someone for a long time and you start to develop their mannerisms, or you see families kind of have the same, I think it's the same way. The more time we spend with the Lord, the more we just pick up, and the more we just kind of, whether we're thinking through this is going to help me parent better or not, you're kind of just the taught versus caught thing. You're going to just, the more time you spend with God, the more you're going to just naturally catch. And I go back to, I think Jesus is such a great example of how to be a friend, how to be a leader, but then also he wasn't a parent, but how to be a parent. He said everything he does, he sees from the Father. And so we can see and know, okay, well, if Jesus does this, then that's a good way to do it. And if this is how he handles his disciples, maybe I could handle my kids that way. Or, this is how he handled the masses. This is how I can handle my family, so I think there's a lot you can pull there, but I think it just comes from spending time and just being intentional with spending time with the Lord.
I think one of the biggest changes I noticed after having a kid is I just got such a new revelation of God's love for us.
It's good.
I'm naturally a pretty emotional person, but after holding my baby girl, I just remember, oh my gosh, I love this girl so much. How much more does my Father love me? And really just looking at all of Scripture through that lens of when God is talking about his children, he's talking about them in the same way that I talk about my child. I think specifically of the story we see of the man whose daughter is sick and he comes to get Jesus and he's asked Jesus to come heal him or heal his daughter. And on the way, Jesus stops and does something else. And I put myself in his shoes. If my daughter was sick, how desperate would I be? If I'm going to Jesus to heal her, knowing how much I love my daughter, how would I feel in that situation? And just really that revelation of what a father's love means, it's totally changed how I read Scripture and how I view God's view of me. Even to the point of, my daughter messes up, she's nowhere near perfect. She's pretty close. But even when she messes up, one of the goals I have is I hope that the first thing she thinks when she makes a mistake is I need to tell my dad, or I want to tell my dad about this.
That's good.
And that has changed how when I mess up, which is often, my first response being, I need to talk to my father about this,
That's really good.
Yeah, that is good. I think that this is just such a good thing for dads to keep in mind when they become a dad, and really, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, you are creating a conception and a perception for your child of God. It's just how human beings are designed. And so for dads to keep that in mind, not as a burdensome weight, but as, hey, I have an important role here. And dads can do that in such a powerful way and such a different way and such a necessary way that moms can't, that kids really need. They need a father's love. And we have a lot of single moms and situations where there aren't dads in the picture for various reasons. And I'm not saying any of this to say that there's no hope for those kids, because God says he will be a father to the fatherless. also look for other people in your kids' lives who can play that role: a grandfather, an uncle, a teacher, a coach, a neighbor, somebody trustworthy who can help create this picture of God. And we want it to be as accurate as possible. It's not going to be perfect. That's okay. But we want it to be as accurate as we can in any given moment. So I just think that's a great thing for dads to keep in mind, that it is part of their role and part of their they just can do it in such a more, just a better way than moms can.
Yeah.
They really can.
Yeah.
I think it's important too, and one of the things that I had to come to grips with and help me out a lot was there is no such thing as a perfect dad. It is a high calling. There's high stakes. You're setting the model for your little girl, for your boy, and there's a lot that is required. But I think just walking in that grace, and that, hey, I don't have to get this perfect. Practice saying I'm sorry. I'll never forget having to apologize to my little girl, because I totally broke her heart. But again, that goes back to, I want her to see that, that she needs to see that that's how you handle it. Same thing with my son. Hey, Daddy messed up, and being willing to model that and say that, but just taking that pressure off, that I don't have to get this perfect, but walking in the Lord, he's perfect, but he's not looking for that from us. He walks in, he loves us in graciousness and mercy and long suffering. And he's like, he's rooting for us to get it. So taking that pressure off. There was a scripture I dropped in my heart. I felt to share that it kind of goes with this. 1 Corinthians 16:13. It just says this: be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. And it goes back to, I think, what Ellen was saying earlier. I think that voice of dads, we need to act like men. We need to understand our role. We need to walk in it. We need to embrace it. We need to study. We need to learn from other people who are doing it better than we are or ahead of us. But we have a role that we cannot afford to abdicate to somebody else, or to say, well, mom's going to do that, or I wasn't showing them a good model of a dad, so I'm out. No, we are called to be the parents and to be the dads to the kids that he's given us, and we need to step to the plate. And as this scripture says, be watchful, stand firm, be men of faith, and be strong. So I wanted to give that to dads.
Yeah.
No,
and I
great.
think working with kids, one thing I've learned is whether they have a father in the house or not, whether he's present or not, a kid will find a father figure.
Absolutely.
And that can work either way.
Yeah.
It can be a great father figure, and it can influence them to do good things. Or if there's a void of a father figure in their life, they can find a bad father figure, and that can impact the trajectory of their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was good. I love that scripture. Before we end, I wanted to ask you, you brought a picture and I wanted to touch on that.
Which one?
Oh, you brought a few?
I brought
Wow.
two.
I love pictures.
He thought it was show and tell.
I like show and tell. I like
Y'all
That's
examples.
the one I colored for you, right?
Yeah.
This is what
Yes.
Nate
Yeah.
did. No, this was just, I had this up in my office, and obviously I've had it up there for a long time. But this is what Megan she drew, and it says, "Daddies are supposed to be their little girl's hero, especially my daddy." And down here, I guess this is me back when I had dark hair, and it says "Daring Daddy." And I think that to me speaks to the role that dads play with little girls, that you're supposed to be their hero, and then.
Even when there's a black cloud.
Even when there's a black cloud
Yes.
over your head, yes.
Oh,
And then this
Could
one
still
was
be the
one
hero.
that
her artistry.
our son wrote, and I have it framed, obviously, and it's in my office. But I don't want to read the whole thing, but I thought this was very interesting. Josh wrote this. He said, "My dad is the executive pastor at the Ark Family Church. even at the age of 40, my dad can still golf, hunt, fish, etc. Personality-wise, my dad is really funny and loving. But he goes on in this whole thing that what stands out to my son was time. The time that I gave to him, time hunting, fishing, playing. Even from an early age, my special memories, my dad one of my most special memories was when my dad and I shot our first deer together. My dad shot his first deer early in the morning, and I shot mine 1 hour later while sitting on his lap. That I will remember that the rest of my life, and my son will. The rest of the story goes on. He and I went hunting a few months later, some point down the road, and we saw nothing the whole day. And I thought he was going to be very disappointed and was going to get disenfranchised with this whole idea of hunting. And I just remember, hey, Josh, I'm really sorry, bud. We didn't see a deer or anything today. I'll never forget. He looked at me and says, it doesn't matter, Dad. I just enjoyed spending time together. And we don't get it right. I obviously didn't get it right with both of our kids. I messed up. But to me, these are the things that I cherish. They're up in my office because at some point I did get it right. And I think that's what, as a dad, should be our goal. We get it right more often than we get it wrong. And at the end of the day, those investments that we put into our kids are going to pay off. You know.
Absolutely. I did want to touch one more thing. Last thing, as Ellen, having a dad, being a little girl, what is the biggest impact your dad has made on your life?
I think it was two things. My dad was I always felt like he was my biggest cheerleader. He made me believe that I could do anything. And I believed him. And he just was my biggest fan, my biggest cheerleader. He spoke a lot of truth, but he was my biggest cheerleader, and still is. And the second thing is I heard my dad pray for me. And when I remember being in high school, and I would walk through the living room and he would be in there. And when I heard him praying for me, that God would protect me, that God would guide me, that I would know his love, that I would know God's love, I would hear these words. He didn't know I was hearing it, but man, it did something in me and for me. And so, a dad's voice makes a huge, huge difference, both for their daughters and for their sons.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you guys for coming on to the Help Me Parent podcast, the Dadsode. Made it through with only one dad joke, so I count it as a win.
Thank you.
I have a whole list. We could go through them. We still have time. But thank you guys for tuning in. Just remember that you can parent and we can help.